Hello everybody, welcome back to another podcast. So we have a bunch of movies that were released in theaters last weekend, of which Dora and the Lost City of Gold and Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark were just two of them. Let's see how those movies did at the box office. Alright, let's jump right in. So coming in at number one is the latest Fast and Furious movie. It is a spin-off called Hobbs Shaw, and it pulled in 25.3 million in the second weekend, a drop off of about 58%, which is kind of in line with a movie of this type, right? It has reviews wise, it's actually a decent, right? 66% on Rotten Tomatoes and an A- cinema score, and this is without the benefit of the rest of the Fast and Furious crew, like Vin Diesel and others, right? Domestically, it crossed the 100 million mark at 108 million. And let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in 223 million for a worldwide total of 331 million, and the budget is 200 million. So it's actually doing okay for this big budget movies. I mean, even though domestically it didn't open as high as the previous Fast and Furious movies, which went up to the 100 million plus. The latest one, I think Fast and Furious 8, I believe, and 7 was huge because of I believe Paul Walker, death. That was huge, and then it took a dip in Fast and Furious 7, and now the spin-off with Hobbs and Shaw, with Dwayne Johnson's character and Jason Statham's character, right? In this movie, they teamed up as a buddy comedy, sort of action comedy, and Idris Elba plays the villain in this one. So there's some names here. There's still fast cars, and there are still chases and explosions, and obviously action. Like I say, it's doing well for a Fast and Furious spin-off. All right, coming in number two is surprisingly Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. This is a movie that I said could probably open somewhere in the 5 to 10 million range, but it pulled in about nearly 21 million in this opening weekend. And it's based on a book, right? And it's produced by Guillermo del Toro. And movies that's based on a book, they usually are hit and miss. And even though this is produced by del Toro, it is not directed by him, so it doesn't have kind of like the look and feel of a del Toro movie. But I guess this brand is enough to scare out the audience for this one, to support this one. So it's actually a pretty good opening for the 21 million opening is actually pretty good for Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. The budget for this movie is about 25 million. Being a horror movie and all, it's probably going to drop off huge in the second weekend. But then again, this is a del Toro produced horror movie, so maybe it'll latch on. Alright, number three is The Lion King. It pulled in 20.2 million in this fourth weekend, drop off of only about 48%, which is still pretty decent for a huge movie like this, right? Domestically, it's 473 million. Let's see how it did overseas. Overseas, it pulled in 863 million for a worldwide total of about 1.3 billion. That's with a B. So yeah, this latest CGI remake or remaster is doing pretty well worldwide. Alright, number four is Dora and the Lost City of Gold, a movie that I thought would do better than it actually did. This movie opened to about 17.4 million. This is a movie I said could probably open to somewhere in the 25 to 30 million range, mainly because of its brand recognition, right? Dora is a very popular TV series, but I said in the previous podcast that this movie kind of targeted older, since the cast Dora as an older teenager, right? So I'm not sure how that will play over with the target audience. Reviews wise, it's actually surprisingly good, 81% on Rotten Tomatoes and an A cinema score. So the reviews are going for this. Unfortunately, the opening figure did not match up to my projections. I mean, 17.4 million for a movie that has such a wide appeal. I mean, a lot of people know about Dora or aware of Dora. Maybe like I said in the previous podcast, I mean the target audience for this movie has probably grown up, and maybe want to take their kids to see this movie, right? And have kids of their own. So go figure. Maybe Dora is not as big of a brand as I thought it is. Alright, number five is Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. The movie pulled in about 11.7 million in the third weekend. Drop off is about 42% from the previous weekend. Domestic gross, it crossed the 100 million It crossed the 100 million. It crossed the 100 million mark with about 100 million right there. The budget is about 90 million, and let's see how it did overseas. It hasn't opened that wide overseas yet, with only 7.7 million reporting in. So for a worldwide total of 108 million thus far. But if we go by previous Quentin Tarantino movies, his movies usually do pretty well overseas. Okay, number 6 is one of the new releases last weekend as well. It is The Art of Racing in the Rain. It's about a guy, an aspiring race car driver, and his dog, voiced by Kevin Costner. This movie opened to 8.1 million. And let's see where I had the movie opening to. I say this movie could probably open to somewhere in the 5 to 10 million range, which is kind of right there, right? 8 million, 5 to 10 million, so yay. Reviews wise, 46% on Rotten Tomatoes, but an A- cinema score, so there's some disagreement with the between critics and the people who watched the movie and got polled. So I suspect that it might be critics saw the movie, right, but people who watched it are fans of I believe this is based on a book, right? The Art of Racing in the Rain. It could be based on a book, I'm not sure, right? But it sounds like one of these movies that's based on a book. So that could explain the discrepancy between the reviews and the cinema score. Okay, number 7 is another movie that I thought would perform better than it actually did, which is The Kitchen. This is the movie that stars Elizabeth Moss, Melissa McCarthy, Tiffany Haddish, Common, and Domhnall Gleeson, among others, right? So it, like I said, this movie kind of have hints of like the movies that was released a couple of months ago with widows, about mob wives who try to commit robbery, try to complete the job that their husbands were trying to do, so that they can get the money to pay back their the creditor, right? This is one of a similar movie, but this one, The Kitchen, is based on a comic book, right? Reviews wise, not very good, 21% on Rotten Tomatoes, but a B- cinema score, which is generally what I thought it would be, because it is for fans of the comic book, right? And casting wise, I thought it was odd because Melissa McCarthy is in here, Haddish is in here, and those are comedic actresses, right? And this is sort of a semi-serious movie with some comedic elements, and I thought that this movie might not play to their strengths. So 21% on Rotten Tomatoes with the professional critics, and being minus cinema score is nothing to be proud of, which but it is an average score, right? So The Kitchen only pulled in 5.5 million in its opening frame, a movie that I thought could open somewhere between 8 to 10 million, based on, I guess, the names, the actors in this movie, but I guess it just didn't have that weight. All right, number 8 is Spider-Man Far From Home. In its 6th weekend, the movie pulled in about 5.3 million, a drop off about 33% from the previous weekend. Domestic gross is at 370 million thus far, and let's see, overseas it pulled in 726 million for a worldwide total about 1.1 billion. So this Spider-Man movie is doing pretty well. And domestically so far, it's only about 3 million or so away from the second highest grossing movie in the Spider-Man franchise. And then worldwide, let's see, but worldwide it's the top movie, right, with 1 billion, and the movie that's coming in second worldwide is Spider-Man 3, so it's 890 million. So yeah, say what you will about Spider-Man, right? It's stewardship. I mean, Sony's decision to turn this franchise over to Marvel is paying off, right? They don't need to reboot this movie again. They don't need to make movies about villains, plan a cinematic universe around the villains. And this one, Spider-Man can actually be plugged into the larger storyline in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. They can, he can appear. Spider-Man can appear in movies with other Marvel superheroes, and other Marvel superheroes can actually appear in, the Spider-Man movie. So it just opens up, the story possibilities for the Spider-Man franchise. All right, number 9 is Toy Story 4. This movie pulled in about 4.5 million in its 8th weekend. Drop off is about 38%. Domestic gross is 419 million, and overseas they pulled in 570 million for a worldwide total of 990 million. So it's getting to the 1 billion mark. Domestically, Toy Story 4 is the highest grossing movie in the franchise, but worldwide it's still about about 77 million or so away from Toy Story 3 1 billion. And closing out the top 10 is the documentary Bring the Soul, the movie, which is a documentary about the Korean boy band BTS, BTS, Burn the Soul. It pulled in 2.4 million in its opening weekend. This is a movie that is kind of for the fans of the band. I mean, BTS is huge in Korea and abroad. As crossover appeal all through the continents. That's why this movie opened up in the top 10. There was a previous movie, I think Burn the Stage or something like that, or Behind the Stage, which opened up in top 10 as well, and it did well. It didn't. I'm not sure how long it stayed in the top 10, but it opened well. The fans went out and saw this movie. For those who couldn't go on tour, catch the concert, they can actually catch the concert with the movie, and there's some behind the scenes in the movie as well. So that's huge for fans of this boy band. Of note is the movie that came in 11, which is Brian Banks. It is based on a true story. This is one of the new releases last weekend as well. A movie that I thought could probably open up somewhere in the 3 to 5 million range, but it pulled in about 2.2 million in its opening weekend. This is a movie that I said, probably couldn't capture an audience because, nobody knows about Brian Banks, nor would they care about this one. So I guess the box office performance is sort of in line with what I thought it would do. Reviews-wise, it's not that great as well, with a 55% on the tomato meter. All right, that's it for the top 10. Let's move on to the new releases. We're going to have a bunch this week as well because, studios in their infinite wisdom say, hey, school's starting. Let's cram all these movies together before kids go back to school. So the biggest of which is probably Angry Birds 2, the sequel to the 2016 movie, which is based on a very popular, ubiquitous, I would say, phone game, mobile game. And this movie is opened on a Tuesday. And then we have Good Boys, and then Where Do You Go, Bernadette, which stars Kate Blanchett, right? And then finally Blinded by the Light, which is a drama which features the soundtrack of The Boss Bruce Springsteen. All right, let's start off with Angry Birds 2 since it's open on a Tuesday, which is tomorrow. I'm doing this on a Monday, right? So the first movie, which opened in 2016, I was not very optimistic on the movie when it was released or announced because, by the time the movie was announced and released, the mobile game was on the downslide. I mean, before, which is Angry Birds is the game that you can find pretty much on every mobile device that can probably support it, right? Because it's free and you don't have to pay anything for it, and kids seem to love it, and it took advantage of the touchscreen interface, right? So given that, I wasn't very optimistic on this movie when it was released back in 2016. But it actually did pretty well. That's why we're seeing a sequel. The first movie wasn't that well reviewed. It only has a 44% on Rotten Tomatoes. But then again, this movie is, that movie is targeted toward the younger ones, the kids, right? And they play this game. I'm sure, like when parents, when parents want to have the kids, stand still, sit still, or whatever, they give them a phone with Angry Birds, right? So that's why I guess this connection there, and why it did so well despite the reviews, since kids don't usually care about reviews, right? The audience score. Let's talk about the audience score. So audience scores is 46% on Rotten Tomatoes as well, so which is not good, which is important. All right, so the first movie had a 38 million opening. It went on to make 107 million domestic and 357 million worldwide, because this game itself is global. It's pretty popular. Budget's only 73 million. I suspect the sequel is probably budgeted the same as well, maybe 80 million or so. So, like I said, the first movie, it's not well reviewed. Audience score is poor. But they made a sequel anyway since it did so well worldwide, right? But like I said, there's this halo effect going on, right? If the first movie is not well regarded, the second movie is going to take a hit, and I think this movie will take a hit. And school is starting as well, and then again, like I said, the Angry Bird franchise, might have taken a dip. But if you watch the trailer, it seems kind of funny. It could appeal to animation fans or Angry Birds fans. There are still animation fans. There are still Angry Birds fans. So for the 3-day weekend, it's probably going to put in somewhere like 20 to 25 million for nostalgic sake, right? And, I guess as the go-to movie for children. But 6 days, probably 35 to 40 million, somewhere in that range. All right, let's move on to 46 meters down, Uncaged. That is important. There's a movie that was released back in, I believe, 2016 as well. I'm not sure which, but it was 46 meters down. It stars Mandy Moore and some other people. It's a shark movie. This one's a shark movie as well. This one 47 meters down, Uncaged. Did I say 46 or 47? So anyway, you do the conversion. 40. If I say 46, you go with 47. So 47 meter down, Uncaged is about 4 college students who went onto this secluded enclave, and they dive down into this like sunken Aztec whatever building, and they got lost in there, trapped in there, and there somehow shark invaded the place, and they have to escape. That is 47 meters down, Uncaged. The first movie, review kind of poorly, but pretty decent for a genre movie. A shark movie at that. 53% on Rotten Tomatoes. It had a 11 million opening. It went on to make 44 million domestic. I'm sure the movie's probably pretty cheap. That's why we're seeing a sequel. Again. The audience score for the first movie, I believe, is 36%. But who knows, right? This is talks about college age female, right? Scantily clad, sharks, horror movie. Recipe, good recipe for a horror movie, right? That's all you need. But I don't think it's probably going to open as well as the first movie. First movie opened to 11 million. This movie is probably going to open less because the first movie had many more. This movie probably didn't have anyone you probably haven't heard of. At least I haven't heard about them. So probably will open to about 5 million. Up next is Good Boys, which is an interesting movie. It is which is an R-rated comedy that's produced by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg, about 3 kids, awkward, trying to get to a party that they're invited to, or not, whatever, right? So they, search on the internet, to how to interact with the opposite sex at this party, right? And this movie, this is one of those movies where we have tweens behaving badly, right? We have movies about men behaving badly. We have movies about women behaving badly. We have teens behaving badly. Now we have tweens, like preteens behaving badly. So Good Boys is that movie. It's kind of funny, it's a comedy. It's an R-rated comedy, so the kids probably couldn't get in unless they buy tickets to Dora the Explorer and snuck in to Good Boys. So how will this movie open to? It is an R-rated comedy. Seth Rogen has his fans. There are fans for this type of movies, like children, tweens, cursing, and there could be some resonance, I would say, with audiences for this one. So I wouldn't be surprised if this movie opens to somewhere in the 15 to 20 million range, if not higher. All right, Where'd You Go, Bernadette? This is a movie that is directed by Richard Linklater, starring Cate Blanchett, Kristen Wiig, Billy Crudup, Judy Greer, Lawrence Fishburne, and others. And it's about a woman, who is a wife and a mother who gave up her career so she can take care of her family. And now the kids are grown up, and she's looking, for her purpose in life. And she discovered that, hey, there's that career she had put off. Maybe it's time to pick that up again, or else she will cause a disaster. So she went to the Arctic. I think it's the South Pole or something like that, somewhere there, to build the structure for scientists and others, right? Linklater's movies are not the most commercial, the biggest of which is A School of Rock with Jack Black, but the other ones, kind of are like indie movies, and this is one of them. So I expect this movie to probably open somewhere, kind of in the neighborhood of 5 million or so. Okay, finally we have Blinded by the Light, which is a British drama about Indian family whose son, kind of resonated with Bruce Springsteen's music, and it talks to him, right? And they try to get him back to be this little diligent Indian, teenager, right? So it's that movie. This movie is written and directed by Gurinder Chadha, who did the Bennett like Beckham movie. Since this movie is about Bruce Springsteen's lyrics resonating with the guy, this movie features the soundtrack, other songs by Bruce Springsteen, and as we know, movies that has the soundtrack of famous musicians or bands like the Beatles, like Yesterday, right? Bohemian Rhapsody. This one has Bruce Springsteen's music. I'm not sure. I mean, he's pretty popular, right? He's pretty well known, and but this movie is not about him. This movie is about how his music, how his lyrics affect, an Indian immigrant family in Britain. Like I said, this movie is comparable to Yesterday, right? Yesterday had an opening of about 17 million and it's still going on to do well at the box office. So I think this movie is comparable to that movie, right? So this movie could probably open up somewhere between, again, 10 to 15 million, if not higher, because it has the soundtrack of Bruce Springsteen. I don't know how many fans are going to turn out for this movie, but because Bruce Springsteen's music is in this one, I'm sure some will turn out to check out this movie, even if they don't have any interest in the movie. Even if they don't have any interest in the movie, they might check it out because it has Springsteen's music in it. So again, 10 to 15 million conservatively, but higher if, hey, his fans turn out. All right, that's it for this week's podcast. Tune in next week to see how I did. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.